Hello beautiful friends, I'm here today to share another Christmas themed project with you. This is part of my celebrations of Christmas in July, which is something that I have done for as long as I have been scrapbooking. It's nice and cold and wet and wintry where I am here in Perth, Western Australia, so it's the perfect time to snuggle in and get working on documenting some of my Christmas stories. So today I'm using an older Simple Stories collection. I have a few pattern papers and just a handful of embellishments from this collection. And I've got a few collections like this in my Christmas stash, and I really want to try and work on getting as much of those used up as I possibly can so that they're not just hanging around taking up space. And for this layout, I am documenting 4 photos which tells the story of the chaos of opening presents. I am somebody who does not really like a lot of mess and clutter around, but this is probably one time of the year where I am happy for it to happen because it's so joyful. The kids love ripping open their presents, and I don't mind the mess on this one occasion. So because I do have the 4 photos, I have gone for a pretty simple grid style layout. I cut out some pattern papers I cut out some rectangles from the pattern papers, and off camera I distressed the edges of those, and then I've layered them up behind my photos. And now I'm just adding a little bit of interest to my white pattern paper background. In one of my recent videos, I was scraplifting Danny V, who used this technique, and it's not a technique that I've actually ever used before. I've got loads of stencils, I've got loads of Distress Oxide inks, and it's a really pretty and soft way of adding some detail to your backgrounds. So for this one, I have the Speckled Egg Distress Oxide, and I realized when I sat down to make this that I really didn't have in my stash a nice minty green. Green is not a favorite color of mine. In fact, it's quite the opposite. So I don't tend to gravitate towards purchasing green things. But shortly after this, I made a trip up to one of my local scrapbooking stores where I like to purchase my supplies from. And I grabbed I think it was the cracked pistachio. So for that, I'm just using a really, really old Versacolor cube. It's not super juicy, it's not super wet, so it was quite subtle, the green color. But in the end, once I've laid everything down, so much of this background is going to get covered up, but I do like that there are small bits of it just peeking through, which is all I really wanted anyway. I'm also coming in with my Heidi Swap Gold Color Shine, and I'm adding some gold splatters to the background. It's something that I do quite a lot on my Christmas layouts because glittering gold, it's just so festive. So that's my background done. Now I'm going to bring my photos back in again and figure out which way I want them to go on my layout. So you can see that when I have backed those photos with the distressed papers, I haven't laid them on straight, so I was intentional in making them a little bit crooked. And what that does, along with the distressed edges, is it gives me a little bit of leeway when I'm placing them down on the page, so that if things aren't perfectly straight and aren't perfectly lined up, it's not going to be noticeable because I have made them a little bit crooked. It removes the need to get things perfectly straight and perfectly lined up. So if you're somebody who likes the grid design, but perhaps like me, you're a little bit of a perfectionist and getting things down straight and perfectly in place is something that will annoy you, then I strongly encourage you to give this technique a try, distressing the edges and making your photo mats just a little bit crooked. So I do bring my T-square ruler in, and I did that off camera because it was a little bit hard for me to peel the backing off my foam tape. But I did use my T-square ruler just to make sure that they were relatively straight. But as you can see, it's not perfect, but it doesn't matter because it's more intentional. So for my title for this page, I'm using this foam sticker, which is from a newer Simple Stories collection. I've purchased a couple of thickers packs or thickers like packs just to help me out with some titles across my Christmas scrapbooking. So I've adhered that down flat against the page with just the loops from the F and the L sitting up on my photo. And now I am coming in with my journaling. As always, I have used my typewriter and I've typed that out, and then I'm using my little guillotine paper trimmer to cut that down into strips, and then I'm just going to trim off the edges and I will adhere it with my liquid adhesive. So I wasn't quite sure where I wanted to place the journaling because this is quite a structured design. I did initially think that maybe I would need to have it centered to the page, but because of the loop on that Y, it would have created some really awkward empty space underneath the title. So to avoid that, I have just tucked it in over here to the right hand side of the page, which means it's not an entirely symmetrical design, but it still works. So I'm quite happy with that. Now we've come on to some embellishing. So I decided to put my date up on a little tab at the top of the top left photo rather than sticking that underneath the journaling. And the decision making that led me to that is, as you can see now, where my journaling is, it sits in line with the bottom of my title. If I'd popped that date underneath, it would have extended a little bit beyond, which I felt was really going to throw off the balance of the layout, just that little bit too much. So my initial thoughts were to create a little bit of a clustered or a layered embellishment clustered on the top left of that photo where I've put the doily, and then another little cluster down the bottom right of the bottom right photo. What you're seeing me do here is really struggle to put, I've got these little gold star paper clips which are quite old from Felicity Jane, and I really struggled to get that in place. But I've got it on now. As I was saying, my initial plan was to just create the two embellishment clusters, one to the top left and one to the bottom right of my grid. And so that's what I work on to begin with. But then because I have popped my journaling down there to the right hand side of the title, it has left a little bit of empty space, awkward empty space to the left hand side of the title. So I thought I would fill that in with a floral, and that floral was fussy cut from one of the patterned papers. And then as I'm working on this cluster to the top right, I decide to come back in and build some more embellishment clusters, which you're going to see me do in just a moment. But for now, I'm tucking in some little bits and pieces to the top right. I have pulled a whole heap of stuff from my little Christmas stash. I knew that I wanted to make use of some wood veneer here, so I've got this little Christmas present, and I'm going to tuck that in underneath the tab that's got my date on it. And to do that, what I did was I just moved the foam dot so that it sits in between the two foam dots that are on that tab. The other thing that I pulled out of my stash that I wanted to use was some of these resin flowers. So let me know in the comments below, do you have these? I feel like they're a little bit old school, these resin flowers, but I really love them, and I've actually purchased like quite a big stash of them. So I have quite a lot of them in my stash in a whole bunch of different colors, and I always forget to bring them out. So I popped them out for this layout, and I've used a soft blue which matches a little bit of the blue that's in the collection and also my mixed media background. And then I'm bringing that blue back in again with some of the embellishments that I'm using on the other two photos, which I'm doing now. So I wanted to add some word strips. I've added 2 little words to the bottom left, and I can't quite read what they say now, and 2 to the top right. And again, initially I thought I would just leave it there, but it just didn't feel right. So that's where I decided to go all in and build embellishment clusters on each of the 4 corners of my grid. I don't make these two, the bottom left and the top right, quite as big and detailed as the ones that I have on the opposing corners. But I felt that adding the embellishment clusters to each of the 4 corners really, again, helped to balance out the layout. It brings that symmetry back in. And it also helps to keep the eyes focused in on the photos, which is where I wanted them to be, of course. I also, so one of the motifs that comes along in almost every Christmas collection that I've ever purchased are very winter themed, so snowflakes and snow and things like that. And I really struggle to use them because obviously, as I said at the beginning, I live in Perth in Western Australia, and our Christmases are the polar opposite of a cold and snowy Christmas. It is hot, usually very stinking hot. So snowflakes don't really suit the stories that I'm telling. But I decided that I wanted to use them up. So I've used them just as a bit of a hidden embellishment. So I've tucked one at the top right and I've tucked one down at the bottom left, and they are sitting behind all of my layers. So it's just become a little bit of a decorative flair piece. You can't really tell that it's a snowflake. It's bringing in a little bit more of that soft blue, and it's just adding a little bit of extra detail. So I thought that was a really good way to use those up. And I think we are coming to the end. I'm just about done. I have this little pack, which is an older pack from Ellie's Studio. It's got these tiny, tiny little wood veneer pieces, and I've pulled out some of the stars, and I'm just going to scatter those around just as little finishing touch details or finishing details. And that will be it to conclude this layout. It's nice and simple, really straightforward. I hope you have enjoyed watching it. If you're new to my channel, I would love for you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you have enjoyed this video, please give me a like or leave me a comment. It really does help me to grow my channel. I will leave it there. You have some close-up photos coming in just a moment. So as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.